Right, so I want to now add some things to our recipe section. So I'm gonna open this up with Sublime, and I want to do, okay, um, don't want to do that. So my index page, and this is the way I suggest you guys do it. Make sure like you've got your navigation kind of the way that you want it. You've got all sorts of stuff the way you want it. Don't be afraid to copy and paste that, and just save yourself a little bit of trouble. Now the only thing is I don't want my recipe page to be the exact same as my main page. Get out of here. So there are some things I want to keep. My header navigation. But I think these images, actually I'm going to hold on to these images just down here real quick. So I'm going to copy and paste them down there. I'm not going to forget about them. They're going to go someplace, just not quite now. My footer is another thing that I can just hold on to. It's just a little contact point, and it's fine just where it's at. So I just need to remind myself, don't forget about those. Okay, so inside the section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on this page, add a table. So as you guys can imagine, the first thing you do when you're adding a table is you type the word table. Nice, calm, and collected. Of course, if I'm going to start a table, eventually all things end. Okay. So in between here, that's where the magic happens. I'm going to start off with this thing. Looks like fed, right? But if you think about it for a couple seconds, it's the table head, right? A lot of these make sense. There's one that I just can't quite figure out what it means. Maybe you guys can help me out. So inside my table head, I'm going to start this thing called a TR, a table row. And basically that means if you can imagine starting a table head just says, okay, I'm going to start this. A table row gives me a row across, but it doesn't know how many columns is in that row. So now what I want to do is I want to make some columns. So I'm going to put a TH tab, and that means table head. And that's just a way. There's another way to do this with a TD, which I don't really know what the D stands for. That will also make a column. The reason why I want to use this is because there's lots of things crawling the web. Like for example, Google will crawl the web and it searches for information. And if you put TH, it's gonna read that as, okay, I'm trying to figure out what this table is about. It looks like random data. What's it about? And the TH tag will say, hey, look here. This is what the table's about. The TD says, okay, this is data, but maybe that's what it stands for, table data. But the table head part will say, this is a key element in naming what the stuff is. So I'm going to put this as the scope. What is this? This is the beginning of, or this is like the top of a column, right? And here I'm going to add a little bit of style. I'm just going to add this style. I'm just going to make the first one have a width of, what do you want? 20%? Sounds good to me. And I'm going to close that down. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And work smart, not hard. So I'm going to copy and paste this. So remember, we're inside my first row, and now I want to figure out how many columns I want. Okay. Sound good? Awesome. So what I want to do is take this information, and I need to figure out how many I want. So I need to figure out how many, like what I want to name on my recipe pages. I know I'm going to want, let's say I want like the food name, or I don't know, I'm going to call it dish. So that's going to be one of my headers for my table. Maybe I'll do like a picture of the link and bugger. And then maybe my last one I want to do is link to recipe. Okay. So in my row, I have 3 columns, and that's just fine with me. So it's time to shut down my row. Okay. So now I'm done with my row, and I'm done with my table head. Okay. My table head, remember, was just me making sure that I labeled everything across my the top column. Now what I want to do is I want to start my next row, right? And I'm going to do that inside. So if the top part's the header, right, of my table, the next part is the body of my table, right? And so this is the top row, and then this is going to be all the other rows that I want. So I start off the same way. I'm in my body. Now I want to start another row, and I can create another table header, right? And I want this one's scope to be, now this is, so this scope part right here, sorry if I brushed over this, this means that I'm the head of the column. So if you imagine, actually let me see here, let me do this. Okay, here's my website. This is this top one right here is the table head, right? And they name, the reason why it says scope column is because assignments talks about everything in the middle here. So it describes the column. So the first one describes the column. The next time I'm going to do this, the table row, I'm going to say that this one's scope is going to be the row. And I'm going to say French onion soup. French onion soup is going to go right here, and it's going to describe everything here. And I'm going to put the picture of French onion soup in this middle tab, and then I'm going to put a link to the recipe in the third one. Right? So French onion soup is going to control this row, and that's really what this scope thing means. So in my row, I have one of them, that is the table header, but I'm also going to need another one that's like, I don't know, it's just a regular one. I use TD here because it's not it doesn't name the entire thing, right? I can just say these, this is this part, and this guy can say I am the part. Okay, and we'll just leave those there for right now. So let's close this down. So I need to end my table row, right? So now my table row is shut down and my table body is shut down. Get out of here. My table body is shut down. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah. Hopefully it's not terrible wrong and I have to restart the entire video. That'd be terrible. I don't think it will be though. Oh, it's off the screen here. Okay. So just a couple weird things here, but it's not so bad. You can see that I have my table. My table part looks great here. Just remember these pictures I just pasted on the bottom part there because I didn't, just to hold on to them. And you can see how dish, picture, link to recipe, those are my column headers. And my French onion soup, and this is this part, and I'm the end part. They all work perfectly. I want one for French onion soup. What were the other dishes? I'm trying to remember now. Oh yeah, there was scallops, and then there was creme brulee. So creme brulee and scallops. When I add those on there, you can see that now I have a nice little table. My table kind of looks like junk, so I kind of want to fix that. So yeah, let's do it. One thing I want to try though is I want to try putting these in here. I'm kind of curious myself to see what will happen. If I put the French onion soup in here, the middle part was the second row was the pictures. So if I go in here, then this should be where the picture goes. And if I do this for the creme brulee, this should be that. And likewise for the scallops. If this doesn't automatically get override to have a width of 20%, we're going to have to do a little bit of CSS to make it work. But it will be, I'm pretty sure this will just work right away like that. Perfect. So now my pictures are all good in there. And I feel pretty nice about how that looks. There's a lot more CSS we got to do though. Let's take a look at the main CSS and start making some stuff happen. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to have the table. So now I can call the entire table. I want to have its max width be, let's say 90%, right? That way it's never going to be outside a certain zone, right? And now you can see it's 90% of the page. You can see where the 10% is cut off. It's all on the right here. It's because it's not centered. So if I want to center that, I can do this. I can do margin. Now earlier I did margin left auto and margin right auto. Just remember I can do that all at the same time if I go like this, right? Because the first number controls up and down, the second controls left or right. So auto will apply to both of those. So now that should be centered. Cool. I can now do this. What if I do this? In each of my table rows, I want to have a background of, I don't know, this is the hexadecimal looking at me. I don't even know what that color is, but we'll see. Let's add a little bit of this, the border to the bottom. You can do border, bottom, top, all that stuff. I'm going to do 1 pixel thick. I want that thing to be solid, and I want it to be the color of FFF. FFF is the same thing as saying FFF, right? Typically we do 6 things, right? But if it's all one thing, then we only have to include 3 of them. The order here is important. If you flip these 2 or any of the other 5 combinations it could be, you're going to have a bad time. Okay, so now I got that color, and I have a all white little what am I talking about? Outline. Cool. So let's talk about some other things. I want to do, we haven't done this before. Sometimes you're going to do a whole bunch of things, like to all my table headers and all the data in my table. Sometimes you want to do the same thing to both of them. You can just separate by a column. Like if I wanted to apply this to the header and also to the body and also to all of the link items. I can just keep listing things and it'll apply to all of them. But if I just want to apply to those 2, I can do this. Text align, and I'm going to do left. I'm going to give myself a little bit of padding. Remember, padding won't push anything away. What padding is going to do is inside the table, it's going to move it. And I kind of want to show you what that looks like here. So you can see this. If I chose margin, this right here, in between where I'm going right here, that's the padding of 20 pixels, right? It pushes its way, but it's still inside the same block. If I added 20 pixels, that would be referring to outside the table, and it would push the edge of the website away. I'm going to increase the font weight. Now each of these, if I do like multiple at a time, you should take your time and do one of them at a time and see what it does. So you can see exactly what each one does. So okay, border right. On the right side, let's do 1 pixel, and let's do solid. How about Colin? And let's do sweet. We're rolling. Now the reason why I only did a border on the bottom and on the right is because that covers up every single one of these things. I don't have to do it on all the sides because the bottom of French onion soup is actually the top of creme brulee. And I also want to do this. Let's do margin right. So just the way that you could do margin like and have the second number measure the right, you can also call it specifically. So there's so many different ways to do that, right? And just the way I could say margin right 5 pixels, I could also do 5%. It doesn't really much matter. It just depends on what you're trying to mess with. What I want to do now is kind of a weird thing. My rows, what I want to do is I want to call and do some changes to my table rows, but I only want to do certain of them, right? What I want to do is every other. So in my table rows, what I'm going to do is the nth, this is kind of a weird way of saying it, the nth child, and I'm going to be talking about those even ones, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the background color of the even ones. I'm going to have that be hashtag E8EEEF. Let's save this sucker, see what that makes it look like. Okay. So the table rows, the even ones, will look like that. So if you're looking at this, you may think, before I click that the even ones would be this one, the French onion soup, because it's the second, and the scallops, because it's the fourth in the thing. Just remember, we're talking about the table rows here. This line across with the dish, the picture, and the recipe, that was, if you look closely here, that wasn't included in it because it's it's in the table head, right? So it's kind of like exempt from that. You see how it's not pictured. So this is my first one, this is my second one, this is my third one. If I was to add a fourth one here, it would get this lighter blue color. I can go back to my main CSS and I'm going to basically just copy and paste this whole thing. I want this whole thing? Yeah. Let's give myself a little space here. And if I talk about the odd ones now, nth child is just like, maybe you've heard a math teacher say like, oh yeah, it's like take that to nth degree. It means like follow this pattern. So, and I can call odd, I can call even, I can make it every third, I can make it every fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever I want. Anything that's a well-established pattern, I can basically do. So let's try this one. Is that enough things? That's enough things. Cool. And here I am. I have an issue that I want to check out. Did I say issue? There's no issue. Okay. So I want to mess around with the table header here. So I want to go into my main CSS and I'm going to do this table header, right? Like this. And I want to change some things inside there. I'm going to change like the font size. That's something we can change. And I wanted to show you this because it has a weird metric. And if you're zoom in here, if you're watching this on YouTube, well, of course you're watching this on YouTube. This is 1.6 M. So basically what it does is it takes the size of what they think a regular M should be on a board, on like a keyboard or whatever. And this means that I'm going to take every single letter and multiply it by 1.6. So if I chose 2M, then it would basically double. This would be triple. So 1.6 is like a little bit more than time and a half there. Right? I'm also going to, yeah, so let's see how that works. Oh, it didn't work. Let me check it out. Alright guys, embarrassing. I said table header, and I wrote out table header when I meant table header, right? Because this is what we called that top row. If you look at our recipe, right, that's our table header. So if I want to select everything inside of that, that's what I have to use. My bad. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to change something very specific, right? I want to change the head row. So if I want to just mess with this thing right here very specifically, and there's a lot of table rows kind of floating around, right? So what I want to do is I want to mess with just this one specifically. Now, this is a very key idea, so I really want you to stop and just pay attention and look at this. I'm going to give it a special ID, and I'm going to call it the top row, right? This is going to be the most specific way I can grab something and make an edit on it. So when I go to my main CSS, if I want to get to what I call the top row, if I want to get to it and make edits on it, what I have to do is just put this little pound sign in front of it. And it just calls not like all of the rows or anything like that, just the things with that, that label. So if I want to change the background of that, I can change it to, let's say, 6270, capital C, O. How about that? So that's just going to change this very top row. I could give that, if I wanted, let's say I wanted the third row to look like that, I could go into recipe and I could give this guy the ID top row. And there you go, right? So that is how you select something by giving it an ID. You may have a site with multiple different tables that you want to look different, so the TR tag is not going to be specific enough to call a certain color. So that ID of something is going to be crucial. In fact, this is probably the best way to make little changes on your website. Whereas this is like a really good way, like for all of your anchor tags, just to call them across your entire website. This is a very broad brush, and this is like, you know, you just sniped it, basically. Okay, just a couple little things to make me feel good here, things that you already kind of know how to do. I'm gonna just pop on a quick box shot of this. Let's go 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 5 pixels, and let's do 8s across the board, right? I want to affect just the table, inside the table, the anchor items inside that. So remember, it works backwards. I want the anchor tags, but I only want the anchor tags that are inside the table. I'm going to change their color to, let's call it, all zeros. You know how they have that annoying purple color all the time? We can change that so they look a little bit different. The other thing I want to do is in my table, let's say I want to have my anchor tags. When I I want to have a little bit of interactivity, right? So have you ever seen on those websites where if you go over something and it's a link, it kind of changes? So what I want to do is when I hover over that, um, and there's a lot of these little tags that we'll learn about. So there's hover, there's anchor tags that have been like visited, things like that. That'll work out. So anyway, let's say with the hover. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change their color to, let's say, AAA. Right? So that's the same thing as writing 6 A's. I'm going to save this. The thing is, I don't have any. I'm over here. I'm talking about anchor tags, but if I look at my recipe page, there's not an anchor tag to be found. So I need to make like an anchor tag right here. So I could say like French onion soup, and I want to make that an anchor tag. So I have to do, well, first I need to find a recipe. Cool, sounds good, sounds good. Okay, I will copy this website. My God, so much cheese, so good. And close down, close down. Okay, so now my French onion soup, I just want to do an href equals, and I want to link it to that site, and close that down, and take the anchor tag all the way to there. All right, so now this is a French onion soup, and when I go over it, it changes colors, right? And probably want to say something like recipe there. Right? Awesome, and I think that will do it. Feel free to add recipes to the rest of them, and keep goofing around.